Somewhere in Blackwood Castle, a king is dying, and no one has told him the truth. It isn't the poison that's about to kill him. It's the person standing closest to his throne. Adrian Blackwood has ruled for 200 years. He has buried enemies, crushed rebellions, and made an entire kingdom flinch at the sound of his name. Tonight, none of that matters. Tonight he is nothing but a body failing in a chair, black veins climbing his throat like roots, his own heartbeat counting down the seconds he has left. Your Majesty, the physician won't meet his eyes. I'm sorry. There's nothing left to try. Adrian doesn't answer. He can't. Every breath now costs more than he has to spend. Then the door slams open so hard it cracks against the wall. Lily, no. A woman's scream, a mother's scream. But a mother's scream. But the child is already past her small bare feet, silent on cold stone, and in her hands is something that should not exist inside this castle. A black box. Carved with silver symbols Adrian hasn't laid eyes on in 30 years. Not since they were buried deep, with his brother. In the ground, she doesn't slow down. She doesn't flinch at the blood on his lips or the black veins spreading beneath his skin like cracks in glass, or the raw animal terror in the eyes of a king who has never once in 2 centuries allowed anyone to see him afraid. She simply walks up to a dying monster and places the box in his shaking hands like it's the easiest thing in the world. Adrian stares down at it, at the crest he thought no living soul remembered, and for one suspended second his failing heart forgets to be afraid of the poison at all. Where? He forces out, barely a whisper. Did you get this? The child looks toward the far wall, toward a portrait he has kept hidden behind a curtain for 30 years, hidden from the servants, from the council, from himself. It was behind your picture. Something in Adrian goes cold that has nothing to do with dying. Because if that box was hidden behind that painting, in that room, a room no one alive is supposed to know exists, then whoever poisoned him didn't get lucky. They knew exactly where to find him, which means they've been standing close enough, trusted enough, patient enough to watch him die for weeks and smile at him the entire time. The King of Blackthorn is 30 seconds from death, and he has just realized the monster in this story was never him. Before we go back to where this all started, I want to know something. Where are you watching this from tonight? Drop your city or country in the comments below. I want to see how far this castle has traveled to find you. 3 months earlier, Mara Ellis had $11.36 on the kitchen table and 8 rejections in her voicemail. What are you counting, Mama? Lily asked, not looking up from her drawing. Just seeing what we've got, baby. Mara slid the eviction notice under the mail before Lily could ask about the number printed across the top in red. 72 hours. She wasn't fast enough. Lily never missed anything. What's that orange paper? You put it away really fast. It's nothing. Mara turned the drawing around instead. A yellow house, a garden, 2 people holding hands in a doorway. Tell me about this one. That's us. One day we'll live somewhere like this. Yeah, baby. Mara kissed the top of her head so Lily wouldn't see her face crack. One day, she'd learned to make that promise carefully. Daniel had made promises too, right up until the morning he didn't come home. Mara never told Lily the real reason. She just said what she always said. Sometimes people leave because they don't know how to stay. It didn't hurt less. It just hurt quieter now. The phone rang 2 days before the eviction date. Live-in position, the woman on the line said. Blackwood Castle. Room, board, and a wage most families would kill for. Mara's grip tightened on the phone. What's the catch? A pause that said more than the sentence that followed. The king doesn't tolerate company. He'll test you. Most don't last the week. And Miss Ellis? There can be no children on the grounds. That's not house policy. That's his. Mara looked across the room where Lily was folding her drawing into her coat pocket like something worth protecting. She had no other doors left to knock on. We'll be there tomorrow. She'd find a way to keep Lily hidden. She had to. Lily pressed her face to the window the second the castle appeared, and didn't blink. Black towers cut into a white moon. Gargoyles perched along the roofline, worn smooth by centuries of rain, watching the carriage the way old statues sometimes seem to, when the wind moves just right. A garden, dead and frost silver, stretched beneath windows with every curtain pulled shut, like the whole house was holding its breath. Mama, she whispered, why does it feel like it's looking at us? Mara didn't have an answer. She just took her daughter's hand. The housekeeper met them at the door with a candle and a warning dressed up as advice. Whatever happens, the king must never see the child. Mara nodded. Lily would stay downstairs. Out of every hallway that mattered. She had no idea her daughter had already decided otherwise. Adrian didn't look up when the new maid entered his chamber. Another one. How long? 3 days? A week. If you're stubborn, I intend to do my work, Your Majesty. They all say that. Number 11 said that. She lasted until sundown. His eyes finally moved to her, the too large uniform, the hands already rough from other people's houses. Charity cases now. Wonderful. I'm not here for your approval, Your Majesty. I'm here to work. That got his attention. Most of them cried by now. Mara didn't. She set down the tray, straightened a blanket he'd only kick off again, and said nothing else. He let her go without a word. He had no idea a second visitor was already climbing the stairs. The door creaked. I said no more trays tonight. I didn't bring a tray. Adrian opened his eyes. A child stood in his doorway. Small, unbothered, entirely uninvited, studying his dark room like she was deciding whether she approved of it. You shouldn't be in here, he said. Where is whoever's supposed to be watching you? Downstairs. Why's it so dark? Don't you like the sun? I prefer the dark. Leave. Instead, she sat down on the floor and pulled a tin of crayons from her pocket. You look sick, she said, and sad. Is anyone coming to see you today? Something old and locked shifted behind his eyes. No one comes. I'd prefer it that way. Okay. She opened the crayons like the matter was settled. I'll stay. Adrian stared at her the way a man stares at weather he can't explain. He didn't tell her to go again. It was the portrait that ended it, half hidden behind a curtain he never opened, a painted face too much like his own to be a stranger's. Lily pointed her crayon at it. Why does that picture look like you? Adrian was out of the chair faster than a dying man should move. Leave. Now. She went, but not before she saw it. A small silver symbol, carved into the frame, half swallowed by shadow. She'd seen that symbol before. She just couldn't remember where yet. And 3 months from that moment, in the middle of a storm, with the king's heart failing and his most trusted advisor standing closer than anyone realized, she wouldn't need to remember. She'd already have the box in her hands. She came back the next day. Adrian heard the door and didn't bother opening his eyes. I told you to leave. You told me to leave yesterday. Crayons hit the floor in a small plastic clatter. This is today. He should have called for someone to remove her. He told himself that every single time, right up until the moment he didn't do it. Lily settled into her spot by the window like she'd always belonged there and got to work. The drawings started small. A castle with sunlight pouring through windows that in reality never opened. Mara, mid-laugh, an expression Lily had clearly memorized because Adrian had certainly never seen it. Then one of Adrian himself, smiling, which was either wishful thinking or an insult. He couldn't decide which. I don't smile, he told her. Not yet. She kept coloring. He didn't throw the drawing away. He told himself he simply hadn't gotten around to it. By the end of the week, there were 4 of them tucked beneath a book on his nightstand, and he still hadn't gotten around to it. Why don't you have any pictures? Lily asked one afternoon. Crayon paused mid-stroke. My mom has my drawings, all over our fridge. You don't have anything. No photos, no paintings, nothing. Memories are dangerous, Adrian said. It came out flatter than he meant it to, an old answer, worn smooth from years of use. Lily considered this with the seriousness of someone twice her age. Only if you forget the good ones. Adrian said nothing, but something in his chest. Something that had been locked so long he'd forgotten it was a door and not a wall. Creaked, just slightly, on its hinge. He thought about that sentence for 3 days. Mara found out by accident. She was carrying linens past the king's chamber when she heard it. Her daughter's voice, easy and unbothered, coming from behind a door that was never, under any circumstance, supposed to be open to her. She didn't knock. She threw it open. Lily. Out. Now. Her heart was already halfway to the floor, already composing the apology, already packing their bags in her head. Your Majesty, I'm so sorry. She knows better. Your daughter, Adrian said, not looking up from the drawing in his lap, is troublesome. Mara's mouth opened. Nothing came out. She refuses to leave when told. She asks questions that are none of her business. She has ruined at least one perfectly good curtain by insisting I open it. He set the drawing down. She may continue visiting. Mara stood frozen in the doorway, certain she'd misheard him. Lily just grinned and picked her crayon back up. The staff noticed before Mara let herself believe it. One curtain, left open. Then two. The king drank his tea without a single complaint about the temperature. The servants no longer flinched walking past his door, and twice now. Twice, someone had caught him sitting by the window in the late afternoon, watching a light move across the floor like he'd forgotten what daylight looked like and was relearning it on purpose. Mrs. Thornton mentioned it to no one, because there was no explanation that made sense, and unexplainable things in this castle had a way of becoming dangerous if you said them out loud. It was Mara who first noticed the tray. Every evening, Lord Victor Ashbourne's personal servant delivered the king's medicine and his nourishment himself, never a housemaid, never anyone else. And every morning, when Mara collected the cup, there was a thin, dark ring crusted around the rim that didn't wipe away easily and didn't smell like anything she recognized. She cleaned it. She said nothing. She told herself it was nothing worth mentioning. Lord Ashbourne had served this family for decades, longer than Mara had been alive. Men like that didn't need watching. She almost believed it. The man who brings the king's tray, Lily said one evening, swinging her feet from the edge of a hallway bench, smells like the room with the locked door. Mara went very still. What locked door? Lily pointed, without hesitation, down the corridor, toward the east wing where every door had been sealed for as long as anyone on staff could remember, and where Mara had been told on her very first day never to go. I don't know what's in there, Lily added, like it was a minor detail, but it smells like that. Mara said nothing else that night, but she didn't sleep either. The attack came without warning. Adrian went rigid in his chair, breath catching wrong, one hand clawing at the armrest like it was the only solid thing left in the room. Lily didn't call for help. She didn't run. She crossed the room and took his hand in both of hers, small and warm against skin gone cold. It passed, slowly, the way storms do. Adrian sat there afterward, hollowed out, staring at their joined hands like he didn't quite understand how they'd gotten that way. I don't remember, he said, quiet, the last time someone held my hand without wanting something from me. I don't want anything, Lily said. Simple, certain. Adrian had no answer for that. 2 centuries of ruling a kingdom and nothing in it had prepared him for a 6-year-old telling the truth. Mara saw him just past midnight. Lord Victor Ashbourne, stepping out of the king's chamber with the quiet, unhurried grace of a man who belonged everywhere he stood, including places he had no business being at that hour. He noticed her in the shadow of the corridor and smiled, warm and easy, the kind of smile that had probably never once made anyone suspicious in 30 years. Miss Ellis. Working late. She said nothing. She was too busy looking at his hand, because tucked between 2 fingers, small enough to miss if she hadn't been looking exactly there, was a glass vial. Empty. Mara didn't sleep that night either. She lay awake replaying it. Victor's easy smile, the vial disappearing into his sleeve before she could be certain of what she'd seen. By morning, she'd almost talked herself out of it. Almost. Then she walked into Adrian's chamber and found him worse. It happened fast after that. Adrian, who had been sitting up on his own 2 days ago, who had let a curtain stay open and asked a 6-year-old questions about her drawings, could barely lift his head from the pillow. The wound where the poison had first taken hold wasn't healing. For a vampire, for a king, that alone should have been impossible. His regeneration has stopped entirely, one physician murmured to another, low enough that they thought Mara couldn't hear. I've never seen anything like it, not in 200 years of service to this family. Could it be age? He's 38. This isn't age. This is something doing this to him. Mara stood in the corner with a fresh cup of tea going cold in her hands and thought about a dark ring around a rim that never quite wiped clean. Lord Victor Ashbourne stood before the royal council with the calm, mournful expression of a man who hated being right. I do not say this lightly, he told them, but we must consider what happens if His Majesty cannot recover. The kingdom cannot be left rudderless, a temporary regency, nothing more, until his strength returns, if it returns. Murmurs of agreement circled the table. Victor had served 3 generations of Blackwoods. No one questioned a word from a man who'd buried the king's father with his own hands. Adrian, half-conscious in the corridor outside, heard fragments of it through the door. Regency if it returns, nothing more. And felt something in his chest that should have been suspicion. Instead, it was shame. Victor had earned trust over decades. Adrian had earned nothing but fear from everyone else in this castle. He said nothing. He trusted the one man he'd always trusted, and let the conversation go. Mara found the stain the next morning. Dark, thin, crusted around the inside rim of the cup. The same as before, except this time she didn't wipe it away. She folded a clean cloth around it instead, tucked it into her apron pocket, and went looking for the youngest of the castle physicians, the one who still looked at her like a person instead of furniture. She showed him the cloth in an empty corridor, voice low. He went pale before she'd even finished explaining where she'd found it. "That isn't ordinary blood," he said, barely above a whisper. "Then what is it?" He didn't answer. He folded the cloth back into her hand, closed her fingers around it, and told her, with something close to fear in his voice, to never mention this to anyone, especially not to Lord Ashbourne. Mara walked away with more questions than she'd started with, and a growing certainty that she already knew who to be afraid of. Lily had gotten very good at not being seen. It wasn't hard. Adults rarely looked down, and a 6-year-old with quiet feet could go almost anywhere in a castle this large if she was patient about it. So when she spotted Lord Ashbourne moving briskly down a corridor she'd never seen anyone use, she simply followed 10 paces back, silent as a shadow. He stopped at a door she'd assumed was just a wall. He pressed something into it, she couldn't see what, and it opened. He didn't look back. He never once considered that a child might be watching. Lily slipped inside after the door swung shut behind him and found somewhere to hide before he turned around. The room was full of things that had clearly been forgotten on purpose. Stacks of old documents, dust thick as fabric, a crown, bent and broken, sitting on a shelf like it had been thrown there in anger, and a portrait. A man who looked enough like Adrian to be his brother, except younger, and painted with a kind of sadness Adrian's portraits never had. Victor didn't stay long. He knelt by a section of the wall, pressed his palm flat against it, and went still. The way people go still when they're afraid of something they can't undo. Then he left, quickly, without ever glancing toward Lily's hiding spot. The moment he was gone, Lily crept to the same spot on the wall. It took her only a minute to find the seam he'd been pressing. A small compartment, and inside it, a black box, carved with silver symbols. She didn't know what it was. She only knew that a grown man had looked scared standing in front of it, and grown men were almost never scared of anything. She took it. Back in her room, she opened it just enough to see what was inside. A small crystal vial full of something dark red, an old folded parchment, and the slim silver key. Before her mother's voice came calling down the hall, she closed the box, tucked it beneath her pillow, and went. There would be time to look again later. She had no idea there wouldn't be. The storm hit just after sundown, and it hit hard. Wind tore at the windows. Somewhere in the castle, a door slammed loud enough to be heard 3 floors away. The lights failed all at once, plunging every hallway into the kind of darkness that made servants grab for each other's sleeves just to stay oriented. Mara was carrying a candle toward Adrian's chamber when she heard the crash. She found him on the floor beside his chair, body seizing, veins gone fully black beneath skin that had lost all its color. His heartbeat, when she pressed trembling fingers to his throat, was slow. Too slow. Getting slower. Someone get the physicians. She was already on her knees beside him, already trying to lift his head. Adrian. Adrian. His eyes opened barely. His voice came out in a whisper that cost him everything he had left. Leave me. No. Mara. No. She said it like a wall going up. I am not leaving you on this floor. The physicians arrived and could do nothing but confirm what Mara already knew. Whatever this poison was, it had learned to outrun every cure they had. Adrian's breathing went shallow, then shallower, and then the door opened. Lily walked in through the chaos like the storm outside didn't exist at all, the black box clutched in both small hands. Lily, no. Mara's voice cracked. You cannot be in here. But Lily was already past her, Already kneeling beside the king she'd been drawing smiling for 3 weeks, and she placed the box directly into his lap without a moment's hesitation. Adrian's eyes found it, found the silver symbols carved into the lid, the crest worn but unmistakable beneath decades of dust. He knew that crest. He had seen it once before in a small stone room he had never allowed himself to visit twice. Then his voice, when it came at last, was barely a breath, but it carried the weight of 30 buried years. That box was buried with my brother. No one moved. The storm still howled against the windows, candlelight guttering with every gust, and Adrian sat there with his brother's box in his lap, and a sentence hanging in the air that none of them knew how to follow. Adrian, Mara's voice was careful, urgent. You have to open it. Whatever's in there. It might be the only thing left. His hands were shaking too badly to manage the clasp. Lily reached over without being asked and undid it for him. Gentle, like she'd done this 100 times before. Inside, nestled in faded velvet, sat a small crystal vial filled with something dark red, darker than blood had any right to be, almost black in the candlelight, moving slower than liquid should move. Adrian's breath caught. That's not possible. What is it? Mara asked. Nightblood. He said the word like it belonged to a story, not a room. It hasn't existed in 300 years. My family believed the last of it was lost when the first vampire queen died. His eyes didn't leave the vial. It can undo what's killing me, but there's only enough for 1 dose. If it's wrong, if it's too late, or too much. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Beneath the vial lay a folded piece of parchment, brittle with age. Adrian lifted it with fingers that had gone numb from more than just the poison. The handwriting stopped his heart before the poison had the chance to. Trust no one who stands beside your throne. Lucian, Adrian breathed. Mara looked between him and the page. Who's Lucian? My brother? Adrian's voice had gone somewhere far away. He died 30 years ago. A rebellion. That's what we were told. That's what everyone was told. His thumb traced the ink, like it might disappear if you pressed too hard. This is his hand. I would know it anywhere. If Lucian had written this, hidden this, sealed it behind a portrait no one was permitted to look at, then the rebellion that killed him had never been a rebellion at all. Someone had silenced him, and whatever he'd discovered before he died, he'd been trying to warn Adrian about it for 30 years. There was no time to sit with the horror of it. Your Majesty, if we administer this incorrectly, the eldest physician's hands hovered, useless, over a substance none of them had ever touched in their lives. Nightblood reacts to the body unlike anything else. If the dose is wrong, if the timing is wrong, it could stop your heart permanently instead of saving it. He doesn't have time for you to be certain, Mara said. Look at him. She was right, and everyone in the room knew it. Adrian's lips had gone the color of ash. His breath came in fractions now, shallow and spaced too far apart. Mara knelt behind him and pulled him upright against her, one arm braced across his chest to hold him steady. Lily, you have to give it to him. Carefully. Just like that. Lily's hands were small around the vial, but they didn't shake. She tipped it gently to his lips, the way she might feed a bird that had fallen from its nest. Patient. Unhurried. Like the room around her wasn't in the middle of falling apart, Adrian swallowed what little she gave him. For 1 heartbeat, nothing happened. Then his whole body convulsed, spine arching hard enough that Mara had to fight to hold him. A sound tore out of him that wasn't quite a scream. His eyes rolled back. And then, stillness. Complete, terrible stillness. Adrian, Mara's voice cracked wide open. Adrian, nothing. She pressed 2 fingers to his throat and felt no pulse at all. 3 seconds passed, then 4. The physicians didn't move. Lily didn't move. Mara held him against her chest and refused, with everything in her, to believe this was how it ended. Then Adrian gasped. A violent, ragged pull of air like his lungs had forgotten how to work and just remembered all at once, all in a single desperate rush. His eyes opened. For a long moment, no one in the room spoke. Adrian's gaze found Lily first, still kneeling beside him with the empty vial cradled in both hands. Then it moved to Mara, whose face was wet with tears she hadn't noticed falling. You saved me, he whispered. She did, Mara said, looking at her daughter. Adrian looked at Lily. Really looked. The way he hadn't let himself look at anyone in longer than he could remember. and something shifted across his face that none of the staff in that room had ever witnessed. He smiled. Not the thin, practiced curve he offered the council. A real one. Lily grinned back like she'd known it was coming all along. By morning, Adrian's voice had returned to its usual iron. "Seal the castle," he told the guards. "No one leaves. No one enters. I want a full record of everyone who has had access to my chambers in the last 3 months." Lord Victor Ashbourne arrived not long after, composed as ever, concern arranged carefully across his features. "Your Majesty, you should be resting, not giving orders." "I've rested enough," Adrian said, and studied him a moment longer than usual. The calm hands, the steady voice, the same face that had stood beside 3 generations of Blackwood kings. For the first time in his life, Adrian wondered what that calm was actually hiding. He said nothing of it. "Not yet. There was another spot," Lily said later, once the room had emptied, "in the wall, where I found the box. A second one, smaller. I couldn't open it. There wasn't a handle, just a little slot. Like for a key." "A key," Adrian repeated slowly. Lily nodded, already digging through the box again. "There was one in here. Silver." Adrian took it from her palm. Old, ornate, engraved with a crest he hadn't seen used in decades, one that belonged not to the royal chambers, but to a chamber beneath them, one sealed since before he was born. "The east wing," he murmured. Beneath it. The passage was narrow, the air inside it stale with decades of undisturbed silence. Adrian descended alone, torch in hand, the silver key trembling slightly in his grip, though whether from lingering weakness or something closer to dread, he couldn't say. The chamber at the bottom was small, circular, and every inch of one curved wall was covered in names. Blackwood names. Names Adrian recognized from portraits, from family records, from stories told to him as a child. Beside each one, a date. He didn't need to guess what the dates meant. He already understood, standing there in the torchlight, that he was looking at a list of the dead. His eyes moved down the wall, name after name, until they reached the bottom. The most recent entry hadn't faded yet. The ink was still dark, still fresh enough to catch the torchlight. Adrian Blackwood, poisoned. Someone had already written it down. Someone had been keeping a record of every murder in his family for 30 years, and they had known, long before tonight, that his name was next. Adrian stood in front of the wall for a long time before he trusted himself to move. He didn't tell the guards what he'd found. He didn't tell the guards what he'd found. He didn't tell the council. He climbed back out of the passage, sealed it behind him, and made a decision that surprised even him. He wouldn't confront Victor. Not yet. Not with nothing but a list of names and a feeling he couldn't yet prove. He would need evidence, and he would need help he could actually trust, which he realized, with something close to bitterness, narrowed his options considerably. Mara found him past midnight, still awake, papers spread across his desk in careful, deliberate rows. She should have been asleep hours ago. She came in anyway, closed the door behind her, and asked what he'd found. He told her. All of it. The chamber, the names, the dates, his own name written in ink still fresh enough to smudge. She didn't flinch. She sat down across from him and started reading. They worked through the night like that, side by side, comparing staff schedules against the dates on the wall, cross-referencing who'd had access to which chambers on which nights. It was slow, tedious work. Neither of them complained. Somewhere around the 3rd hour, Adrian noticed her hands reddened, calloused, the skin cracked at the knuckles from years of scrubbing floors that weren't hers, and carrying trays that weren't hers either. "You never complain," he said, without quite meaning to say it out loud. Mara didn't look up from the page in front of her. Complaining doesn't put food on Lily's table. It was such a small thing to say, but Adrian had spent 2 centuries surrounded by people who wanted something from him. Titles favor protection gold, and here was a woman with ruined hands who wanted none of it, who measured her days by whether her daughter ate not by what a king could give her. He found he couldn't stop thinking about that. Lily proved more useful than either of them expected. "Lord Ashbourne wears the same ring every day," she said the next morning, swinging her legs from the edge of Adrian's window seat. "Silver, with a little symbol on it. I saw it up close once when he was talking to Mrs. Thornton." Adrian went still. What did the symbol look like? Lily thought about it, then reached for a scrap of paper and drew it from memory. Small, careful lines, a shape closing in on itself like a coiled thread. Adrian's blood ran colder than the poison ever had. It matched the crest carved into the black box exactly. "His servant's the one who brings your tray every night," Lily added, like she was listing ordinary facts about the weather. "And I saw Lord Ashbourne go into that sealed room. That's where I found the box in the first place." 3 details: a ring, a servant, a room. None of them proof enough for a courtroom. All of them more than enough for Adrian. Victor came to find Mara alone, the way men, like him, always did. She was folding linens in the servants' hall when he appeared in the doorway, pleasant as ever, hands clasped behind his back. "Miss Ellis, I understand your daughter has quite the imagination." His voice stayed level, almost kind. "Children invent things. It's harmless usually, but I'd hate for anyone to repeat those inventions somewhere they might be taken seriously." Mara kept folding. "Is that a warning, Lord Ashbourne?" "It's advice." He stepped closer, and something in his expression sharpened just slightly, just enough. Humans who interfere in vampire politics rarely survive long enough to regret it. "I would hate for your daughter to grow up without a mother because you couldn't recognize a kindness when it was offered to you. I'm not giving you the box." Victor's smile didn't waver. "You have no idea what you're protecting." He left before she could answer that. Mara stood there a long moment, hands trembling slightly around a linen she'd already folded twice. She didn't tell Adrian. He found out anyway. One of the servants mentioned it in passing, not realizing what she was repeating, and Adrian's reaction was immediate and cold enough that the entire hallway went silent around him. He found Mara within minutes. "He threatened you." "It wasn't a question. I'm handling it." "He threatened you," Adrian said again, quieter this time, which was somehow worse. For a moment, she saw exactly what he was. Not the man who'd smiled at Lily's drawings, but the king who had ruled Blackthorn through fear for 2 centuries. And the sight of it should have frightened her. It didn't. "I'm not afraid of him," she said. "I'm not worried about him." Adrian's voice had gone very still. "I'm worried about you." Mara understood then exactly what he meant, and exactly how long it had been since anyone had worried about her at all. "Stay close to me," he said, "until this is finished." She didn't argue. It was Adrian who finally asked. "You flinch every time someone makes you a promise," he said one night, watching her across the desk. "Why?" Mara was quiet for a while before she answered. "His name was Daniel, Willie's father. He left when things got hard. Not all at once, just slowly. Until one day he wasn't there anymore, and I was still waiting for him to come back." She kept her eyes on the papers in front of her. "I waited 2 years, if I'm honest. Told myself he'd come to his senses. He never did. And now I don't let people make promises to me. And I try very hard not to let Lily get attached to anyone who might disappear on her the same way." She finally looked up. "So no, I don't trust easily, Your Majesty. I've learned better." Adrian could have said something grand. He'd said grand things to 100 people who wanted to hear them and meant none of it. He didn't with her. "Then don't trust me yet," he said instead. "Trust what I do, not what I say." Mara looked at him for a long moment. Something in her chest loosening just slightly, carefully, the way a held breath finally lets go. It wasn't a promise. It was better than one. Later that night, alone, Adrian returned to Lucian's parchment. He'd read it a dozen times already. "Trust no one who stands beside your throne," and found nothing more in it no matter how long he stared. But the moonlight through his window fell differently tonight, low and slanted, catching the page at an angle he hadn't tried before. And beneath the first line, faint as breath, a second sentence emerged. Ink meant to be read only by moonlight, hidden the way Lucian had hidden everything else that mattered. "Victor knows where the first blood sleeps." Adrian read it twice before the meaning fully landed, and when it did, the floor seemed to tilt beneath him. This was never only about the throne. Victor wasn't trying to seize a crown. He was hunting something far older than any Blackwood king. A power buried so deep in his family's history that Adrian himself had only ever heard it spoken of in warnings, never in truth. And if Victor found it first, a stolen throne would be the least of what Blackthorn had to fear. Adrian didn't sleep after reading the second line. He sat with it until dawn, And when Mara found him still at his desk, he finally said the words out loud. "There's a legend, older than this kingdom," he said. "Older than my family's crown. It says the first vampire queen's blood is what created all of us. Every bloodline, every royal house, everything we are. Most believe the source died with her centuries ago. My family always knew otherwise. We just never spoke of it. Why not? Because whoever controls it doesn't just control power." He met her eyes. "They control regeneration itself. They could end an entire bloodline, or start a new one, born only of their own choosing." He paused. "Victor doesn't want my throne, Mara. He wants to replace every Blackwood who could ever challenge him. Permanently." The realization about Lucian came slower, and it hurt more. Adrian had spent 30 years believing his brother died fighting rebels who'd never truly existed, a story fed to a grieving family by the one man everyone trusted to deliver it. But the pieces, once he let himself see them, formed a different shape entirely. Lucian hadn't died in a rebellion. He'd been taken. He must have found what Victor was searching for, or found proof of what Victor intended, and hidden the nightblood in his warning before Victor silenced him for good. The message had been meant for Adrian all along, sealed behind a portrait no one was allowed to look at, waiting 30 years for someone small enough, curious enough, brave enough to find it. Adrian had spent 3 decades in that castle and never found it. Lily had needed one afternoon. That night, for the first time, Adrian told Mara about his parents. "I was young," he said, "younger than Lily. My mother trusted the wrong person, and it cost her everything. She died, protecting me. I still remember the sound of it. If I let myself." His voice stayed level, but something underneath it wasn't. "My father never recovered. He spent what was left of his life chasing revenge instead of raising a son. I inherited a crown before I understood what one cost. And you decided love was the price," Mara said quietly. "I decided love makes people vulnerable, so I stopped allowing myself to feel it. For anyone." He looked at her, unflinching, like the confession cost him something to say plainly. "It was easier that way. Safer. For 200 years, it worked." Mara was quiet for a long moment. "You didn't become cruel because you stopped feeling," she said finally. Adrian looked at her. "Then why?" "Because feeling hurt too much." Something in his chest went very still. In 2 centuries, no one had ever said it back to him that plainly, had ever looked past the crown and the fear and the cruelty and seen exactly what it had been protecting. Adrian understood in that moment that Mara wasn't afraid of him because she'd never mistaken him for a monster in the first place. The door burst open before either of them could say anything else. "Are you going to marry my mom?" Mara nearly choked. "Lily." Adrian, for the first time in longer than he could remember, laughed. A real one, startled out of him before he could stop it. Lily climbed onto the window seat, entirely unbothered by the chaos she'd caused. "You look at her the same way you look at me when I draw something you like." "That's how I know." "Lily Ellis." Mara's face had gotten the color of the curtains. "That is not." "It's a fair question," Adrian said, still fighting the smile pulling at his mouth. "One I don't have an answer to yet." "That's okay," Lily shrugged, already pulling out her crayons. "I'll ask again tomorrow." Mara buried her face in her hands. Adrian, watching her, thought that of all the sounds this castle had held in 200 years, he'd never once heard laughter fill it quite like this. It didn't last. The attack came without any warning at all. Adrian went rigid mid-sentence, breath catching wrong, one hand grasping blindly for the edge of the desk. Lily was on her feet before Mara even understood what was happening. "It's the same as before," Lily said, urgent now, all the warmth gone out of her voice. "Mama, it's the same thing." Mara caught him before he hit the floor. His veins were already darkening beneath his skin, faster this time, hungrier. Someone had given him more than before, far more. "Someone's been in here," Mara said, realization landing like a stone. "Someone's been in this room." She didn't wait to think it through. She got Lily behind her, dragged the door shut, and threw the bolt with hands that had stopped shaking only because there wasn't time left to let them. A moment later, a shadow crossed the gap beneath the door. "Miss Ellis." Victor's voice, calm as ever, drifted through the wood like nothing in the world was wrong. "Open the door." Mara didn't answer. She kept her back pressed against it, Adrian's failing weight against her shoulder, Lily's small hand gripping the back of her dress. Miss Ellis. A pause. Longer this time. I won't ask twice. You're not coming in, Mara said. For a moment, silence. Then Victor's voice changed, the warmth gone out of it entirely, replaced by something colder than the storm outside had ever managed. Then I suppose, he said, I'll have to come in myself. The door shuddered against its frame. Then it shuddered again, harder, splintering slightly at the hinge, and Mara understood with a cold certainty that settled deep in her chest that a locked door was never going to be enough to stop him. The door split at the hinge on the third strike. Wood splintered inward, and through the gap Mara saw them, not just Victor, but a line of his personal guard behind him, filling the corridor, shoulder to shoulder. An army for one dying king and a maid with nothing but her own body between them. Miss Ellis. Victor's voice had lost its last trace of patience. Step aside. This doesn't need to go any further than it already has. Mara didn't move. Adrian's weight sagged against her, his pulse fluttering weak and wrong beneath her hand. Behind her, Willie stood frozen. Until, suddenly, she wasn't. The key, Lily said, urgent, tugging at Mara's sleeve. Mama, the key. The little door under the floor, by the fireplace. I saw it when I was drying. Mara didn't ask questions. She dragged the heavy rug aside with one arm while holding Adrian upright with the other. And there it was. A seam in the stone. A small lock shaped exactly like the crest on Lucian's silver key. The passage swallowed them just as the door gave way behind them. The tunnel was narrow, black, and endless in the way that fear makes distances feel. Adrian could barely lift his own feet. I can walk, he said, for the third time, and for the third time, his legs betrayed him. Mara caught him before he hit the stone floor, hauled his arm across her shoulders, and kept moving. No, you can't. Stop arguing, and let me help you. I have commanded armies, he said through gritted teeth, humiliation sharper than the poison in his veins. I do not need to be carried through my own castle by someone smaller than you. Yes, I noticed. Mara adjusted her grip, steady despite the weight nearly buckling her knees. You carried a kingdom for 200 years, Adrian. Let somebody carry you for 5 minutes. It won't kill your pride. Probably. He didn't answer, but he stopped fighting her and let himself lean into her shoulder the rest of the way. The old chapel opened up ahead of them, dust-choked and forgotten. Moonlight bleeding through a shattered, stained glass window overhead, and air, tucked beneath a collapsed pew, wrapped in oilcloth to survive 30 years of damp stone, were Lucian's records. Adrian read them on his knees, because his legs still wouldn't hold him upright, page after page in his brother's hand, dates matching every poisoning in the family going back decades, notes on Victor's movements, his private meetings, his growing obsession with a legend everyone else believed was only a story. Proof, in ink, of exactly what Victor had done to Lucian, and exactly what he intended to do to Adrian. He's been planning this for 30 years, Adrian said, hollow. He killed my brother for finding this. He's been poisoning me slowly enough to blame it on weakness, patient enough to control the council before anyone thought to question him. Mara knelt beside him, reading over his shoulder. This is enough. This is everything. It won't matter, said a voice from the chapel doorway, if neither of you live long enough to show it to anyone. Victor stepped into the moonlight, and for the first time, he didn't bother smiling. 200 years, Adrian, and this is what you've become. His eyes moved over the scene, the king on his knees, the maid beside him, the child clutching an empty box behind them. Weak, sentimental. You let a servant hold you up like a child, and you call it strength. You murdered my brother. Your brother was going to ruin everything our family built. Victor's gaze slid to Mara, contemptuous. And you, a human, playing nursemaid to a king who'll forget your name the moment he's strong enough not to need you. Then his eyes found Lily. And this, he said, almost bored, was never meant to happen at all. An accident. A child who wandered somewhere she had no business being. Something in Adrian broke loose at that. He was on his feet before he decided to move, poison and exhaustion forgotten, every fragile ounce of strength he had left thrown behind the fury in his chest. He didn't fight like a king anymore. He fought like a man defending the only thing he had left to lose. It wasn't enough. Not alone. Victor was faster, stronger, untouched by weeks of poison, and within minutes he had Adrian pinned against the broken altar, one hand closing slowly around his throat. Mara didn't hesitate. She grabbed a length of iron candlestick from the fallen pew and swung it hard across Victor's shoulder, buying Adrian half a second, just enough for him to twist free and land one more blow that sent Victor staggering back. It still wasn't enough, but Lily had gone very still, staring at the silver key clutched in her hand, remembering, suddenly, that it had never quite looked like an ordinary key at all. "The box," she said. "It wasn't just a hiding place. It's part of this." She ran. There was a seal in the chapel floor beneath the altar. Stone, ancient, carved with the same coiling crest that marked Victor's ring, the black box, and the wall of names beneath the east wing. Adrian had walked past it 100 times without ever knowing what it was. Lily didn't hesitate. She pressed the silver key into a groove at its center, exactly where it fit, like it had been carved for her hand alone. "Lily, wait," Mara started. Too late. The chapel floor groaned, deep and ancient, stone grinding against stone. Victor's face went white with something Adrian had never once seen on him before. "What have you done?" he screamed. The seal split apart beneath the altar, and where solid stone had stood a moment before, a passage yawned open, darker than the tunnel they'd escaped through, older than the castle itself, leading down towards something none of them had ever been meant to see, the source of the first blood. Victor didn't hesitate at the edge of the passage. He descended into the dark like a man walking toward something he'd wanted his entire life, and Adrian went after him without stopping to think twice. "Stay here," he told Mara, pulling free of her grip. "Both of you," behind the seal. "Whatever happens down there, you do not follow." Mara caught his sleeve. "Adrian, I need you safe." His eyes found Lily, small and pale beside her mother. "Both of you, please." He didn't wait for an answer. He went down into the dark, alone. The chamber beneath the chapel was older than anything Adrian had ever stood inside. Walls carved with symbols that predated the castle, predated the kingdom, predated even the name Blackwood. At its center, something pulsed faintly with a dim, ancient light that had no business existing after 3 centuries of silence. Victor stood before it like a man in prayer. "Do you feel it?" he asked, not turning. "This is what your family was built from. And you've spent 200 years pretending it doesn't matter, hiding it, burying it, letting it rot in the dark while our kind grows soft and complacent under your rule. You murdered my brother for this." "I murdered your brother because he was weak enough to want to protect it instead of use it." Victor finally turned, and whatever mask he'd worn for 30 years was fully gone now. "I'm going to build something greater than your family ever managed. An empire ruled by strength, not sentiment, not softness, not—" His eyes flicked toward the passage above, toward where Mara and Lily waited. "Not distractions. Join me," Victor said. "Or don't. But know this. Love made you weak, Adrian. It always does." Adrian thought of the last 3 months. The drawings tucked beneath his book. A small hand holding his through the worst of the pain. A woman who never once asked him for anything, who'd carried him through a tunnel on legs half his size, who'd looked at the King of Blackthorn and seen a man worth saving. "Love didn't make me weak," he said. He looked up toward the passage, toward the seal where Mara and Lily stood watching, and something in his chest settled into place like it had been missing its whole life and had only just found where it belonged. "It reminded me what I was fighting for." Victor's face twisted with something close to disgust. Then he attacked. The fight was uneven from the first blow. Victor was rested, untouched by poison, drawing strength from proximity to the very source he'd spent 30 years hunting. Adrian was still weeks from healed, running on will alone, and it showed. He took a hit that sent him sprawling across the ancient stone-tasted blood, and barely got his arm up in time to block the next strike. Above, Mara wasn't idle. She'd brought Lucien's records down with her. She wasn't leaving them behind for anyone to burn. And in the dim light, she found something she'd missed the first time. Instructions written in Lucien's careful hand, for stabilizing the remaining poison still moving through Adrian's blood. A binding herb. A pressure point. Nothing that would cure him, but enough maybe enough to steady him for the fight he was losing. "Lily, stay back," she said, already moving toward the edge of the seal with the herb crushed between her palms. But Lily wasn't looking at her mother. She was looking at the key, still resting in the groove where she'd left it, and at Victor, glowing faintly brighter every time he struck Adrian down. "It's not just a key," she whispered. "It's holding something. That's why he's so strong down there." She reached out and pulled it free. The effect was immediate. Victor staggered mid-strike, the unnatural strength draining out of him all at once, like a tide pulling back from shore. The chamber's dim white dimmed further, and Adrian, given one single unguarded second, took it. By the time the royal guards finally broke through the upper passage, Victor was on his knees, pinned, stripped of everything that had made him dangerous. He confessed to all of it, right there on the chapel floor, in front of guards and council members alike. Lucian's murder, the poison, 30 years of quiet manipulation, every name on that hidden wall. He didn't beg. He simply stated it, flat and cold, like a man reciting a debt he'd always known would come due. Every voice in that chapel expected Adrian to end it himself. Instead, Adrian said, "Take him. He will be tried before the full council, publicly, for every crime he has committed." It wasn't mercy born of weakness. Everyone in that room understood, watching him, that the king who could have killed Victor with a single word had chosen something harder instead. 3 days later, Mara began packing. Adrian found her folding Lily's few dresses into a worn bag, and something in his chest went cold in a way the poison never had. "You're leaving." "My work here is finished," Mara said, not quite meeting his eyes. "You have a kingdom to rebuild. You need someone who belongs in your world. Not," she gestured at herself, at the apron still hanging by the door, "not this. That's not why you're leaving." She stopped folding. "I can't let Willie believe people stay when they don't, Adrian. I've already taught her that lesson once. I won't do it again." "Then let me show her otherwise. What does that mean?" He didn't answer. He only asked her to stay one more night. Just one. And something in his voice made her agree before she'd fully decided to. She found it the next morning, sitting outside her door. Not gold, not jewels, not anything. A king was supposed to offer. Just a small box, and inside it, a single silver key. A note was tucked beneath it, written in Adrian's own hand. "For the door you thought would always be closed." The key fit a door at the end of a corridor Mara had never once been permitted to enter. She turned it slowly, half expecting nothing, half expecting everything, and pushed the door open into a room flooded with morning light. It didn't look like anywhere else in the castle. The curtains here weren't just open. They'd been taken down entirely, replaced with something sheer enough to let the whole sunrise pour through. Shelves lined one wall, stacked with books. A basket overflowed with crayons in every color Lily had ever asked for. There was a small writing desk by the window, a scatter of soft toys across a rug woven with flowers, and vases of real ones, fresh, impossibly bright, set along every sill. Lily stood frozen in the doorway behind her mother, eyes wide, taking it all in like she didn't trust it to still be there if she blinked. "Is this?" she started, and couldn't finish. Adrian was waiting by the window, hands clasped behind his back, watching her reaction like it mattered more than anything he'd survived in the past month. "It's yours," he said. "Every child deserves a room where they feel safe." Lily crossed the space in 3 running steps and threw her arms around him before he'd even finished the sentence. Mara stood in the doorway a long moment, watching her daughter explore a room built entirely out of small, specific kindnesses. The exact color crayons Lily favored, the exact books she'd once mentioned wanting. A window facing the exact direction of the sunrise she loved to draw. This wasn't a king trying to buy anyone's affection. Gold couldn't have built this. Gold didn't know Lily's favorite color, or that she liked to write stories no one had asked her to write, or that she'd spent her whole short life without anywhere that felt permanently, unquestionably hers. Adrian had built her daughter a room that said, without a single word, "You are staying." Mara understood, watching him watch Lily laugh, exactly what he'd actually been offering her all along. He found her alone later that evening, on the same window seat where all of this had started. Adrian didn't sit across from her the way a king holds an audience. He knelt, instead, and reached up and removed the crown from his own head, set it aside on the stone floor like it weighed nothing at all. "I'm not asking you to marry the king," he said. Mara's breath caught. "I'm asking you to stay with the man underneath him." For a long moment she couldn't speak. "Adrian, I want to believe you. I do. I just..." Her voice cracked, honest in a way that cost her something. "I don't know how anymore." "I won't ask you to trust my words," he said, quiet, steady, the same voice he'd used the night he told her he wasn't worried about Victor. "I'll spend the rest of my life proving them." Mara didn't answer right away. She looked past him to where Lily stood in the doorway, having clearly abandoned any pretense of not listening. Lily just smiled. "He stayed," she said simply. Mara looked back at Adrian, at the crown on the floor, at the man kneeling in front of her instead of standing above her, and finally, quietly, she said yes. The wedding was small. Exactly the way Mara wanted it, and exactly the way Adrian, for the first time in his reign, allowed himself to want something too. No grand cathedral, no endless court procession. Just the chapel. Clean now, restored, moonlight falling clean through the mended stained glass, and Lily walking slowly between them, scattering flower petals with the solemn concentration of a girl who understood exactly how important her job was. The vampire court whispered, of course. A human bride. A maid, no less, who'd scrubbed their floors only months before. Adrian heard every word of it, and found, to his own quiet surprise, that none of it touched him at all. For 200 years, he had ruled according to expectation. Tonight, for the first time, he was simply choosing his own life. Months passed, and the castle became something Adrian barely recognized. Every curtain stayed open now, morning and night. The dead garden bloomed back into color, tended by servants who'd started laughing again in hallways that used to hold only silence. Music drifted through corridors that had gone unfilled for decades. Lily's drawings covered nearly every wall of Adrian's study. Sunlit castles, smiling kings, a family standing outside a house that finally, truly belonged to them. New portraits appeared where old ones had been taken down years before Mara ever arrived. Mara herself no longer wore the gray uniform that had once marked her as invisible in these halls, and Adrian never ate alone again. One evening, Lily found him in a throne room standing beside the antique black box he still kept close even now, the empty nightblood vial resting inside it, Lucian's message folded beneath, the silver key that had once unlocked far more than a door. "Are you still scared of being alone?" she asked. Adrian looked at Mara, seated nearby, watching them both, with the quiet contentment of someone who no longer had to wonder if this would last. Then he looked at Lily. He smiled, the real one, the one she'd drawn for him long before he ever believed it was true. "No." "Why not?" Adrian knelt down to her level, the way he had the very first time she'd refused to leave his room. "Because you walked into my darkest room," he said, "when everyone else had already left.